real estate in Orlando, Florida. He's a phenomenal coach. And have at it, Mark. How are you today?
Doing absolutely phenomenal, Milton. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
And I know we've talked about this in the past. I had the easy job in just sharing with you what to do, but you had to do all the heavy lifting. So I give you all the credit, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that. And Mark, so I always like to start with, tell me about you. Who is Mark George?
Well, professionally in business for 15 years, coaching for 10 of those. Have had a few team scenarios throughout the years, and recently started a new team project here towards the end of last year. And so have been transitioning from more of a production role to really my passion, which lies in coaching and training and working with my team here, and then still doing some private coaching as well.
Okay, so you're building out a team,
Yep.
and you're also doing a
We're
real
building on a
estate.
team right now. We're not without its challenges, but been working on getting a training program together, which has been fun. We've got all new salespeople here, so working with people just getting into the business. I believe you were what, 4 or 5 years in the business before we started working together?
Yeah, I think it was about year 5 or 6 when I finally
Okay.
jumped into coaching, and you were my first official coach, I would say, or first real
Yeah.
coach.
Well, so I got you then just at the right time,
Yeah,
because there's a lot of great coaches out there, guys. And many times, what makes a great coach, just to be clear, is a great client. All right. And I happened to catch Milton at a time where he had made the decision that this was going to be his business, this was going to be his career, and he came in already with the level of commitment that it takes to make a great client. And as much as I'd like to take credit for that, the fact of the matter is he was preloaded with the motivation, and I just needed to show him the right guidance to get him on the right path.
yeah. And a guy like me, I don't just hire someone with no results. So maybe you can tell me a little bit about how many years you've been in business, transactions, and how your business is structured now.
So we're hovering around 1,000 transactions at this point. I haven't really been tracking it since I've backed off production. I might only personally do a couple of deals a month at this point. Our team structure currently is myself as the lead. I'm like the head coach. We've got two admin here. We've got, what do we have? We have 8 salespeople right now. Like I said, everybody new in the business. We've got a handful that have been here since the beginning. Quite frankly, we've had a lot of folks that have come and gone over that period of time, and that's something that I've had to get used to. I think that's just part of any team. Certainly a new one, understanding what makes a good hire. Um, and you guys know this, who, just by a show of hands, who's a year or less in the business?
Yeah, a lot of people
Okay, so
that are in our national prospectors group are either brand new or a couple years in. So most of us are getting started.
okay, so then you guys can appreciate how challenging that early climb is as a new agent. And no matter how good the coaching or training is, we're some of us, it's a tough job and not for everyone. But kudos to you guys for being on this call, because you could not have a better example than Milton. He is a highly coachable individual, and that's one of the things that we look for out of our team members. It's just difficult to see, because according to everyone, they are coachable, right? And then it really is just, how do they show up to the coaching opportunities, and how do they execute on them? And just frankly, that takes time on the job to see how that's going to work out.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the at the end we typically ask questions, and one of the questions I'll probably end up asking, which I think I'd like you to answer now. How does someone overcome the challenge of going from uncoachable to coachable to getting more business for their family?
That's a good question, and I can only speak from personal experience on that, because I was not coachable for pretty much my whole adolescent life. My parents can attest to that. Hey, mom and dad.
Hello.
And I think there was a decision that I made at one point that I said to myself that things are not. I knew that there were bigger things that were out there for me, and the way that I was doing it was not working out. It was just, I thought I was a smart guy, and that was showing up in a lot of areas in my life that were not working. Had started going to some seminars early on. I was actually a Landmark guy years ago.
Okay.
And I think that between that and going to see Mike Ferry, really got me to understand that if I'm just willing to listen to other people that have done it, and be open to new ideas, at least new to me, then it was going to work out, right? Because the law of averages is always going to be in play, and everybody's got an individual circumstance that might change their trajectory in some way, but for the most part, this business is quite simple, guys. In fact, it was described to me not too long ago as an 8th grade level business. And so, which I'm sure anybody that's done a transaction or two can attest that it's not a terribly complicated business, but it is a lot of hard work. I was not afraid of the amount of work. I just really wanted to know what's the most efficient way to do it. And recognizing that my path to being successful in it meant me being coachable, the decision was easy. So I think it was a personal decision in the beginning, and then once I found where to find the information, then it was the switch had been flipped.
That makes sense. So you ultimately made a decision that you wanted more. You realized what you were doing wasn't working, and you figured out there was a model out there by going to a seminar. And one of the things you learned was real estate's an 8th grade level business.
Yeah, it's really not. I mean, if you guys were to look at it, if you guys had people constantly walking in your office that were totally motivated and qualified to buy or sell homes, how easy would your job be?
So walking in and asking us, hey, we want to buy a house.
Yeah, like Milton, when was the last time that you had somebody come ring your doorbell and say, hey, I'm ready to list my house, can you help me?
I had that dream one time, then I woke up.
I'll bet you did. We've all had that dream, right? Okay, so in other words, for the most part, I don't think does anybody have those kinds of people coming in and out of their office all day?
Nope.
No. Okay, so in other words, our job. Oh, hold on. I think I saw somebody. Is this Lana? Do you have people walking in and out of your office?
Yes, it's Lana. So our office, my partner and I did our first joint floor duty, and we actually had buyers that came in for property. We were able to help them and get their homes. It does happen.
Awesome.
Yes.
It does happen. All right, there you go. So you see, there's hope for us, Lana. Thank you.
Thank you.
For the rest of us, we don't have that great. See, I'll tell you what. If I lived where it looks like where you live, I would probably be walking into your office asking for business myself. Where are you?
Mute. Okay. Sorry, trying to find the unmute button. Destin, Florida.
Destin, I was going to say, it looks like you're in Maui.
Well, that's
So-
Hawaii is my home, and Destin's my second home, if you will.
Hey, Mark, if
Gotcha.
you can, when they're talking, maybe mute, because I think your mic and
Okay.
speaker connection, we're getting a lot of feedback from the,
Gotcha.
from the audience.
All right, cool. I'll play audio tech at the same time. You got it.
You know, fitting, because you used to be a DJ. I think.
I was in the music business for about a decade before coming into this lovely business. So I'll have to draw on some of those early skills. But
There you go. Thank you.
yeah, I think anybody that's willing to make the decision to make a change, and they've truly made the decision to make the change. They're not just aspiring to be someone else, which I think there's a key distinction in mindset there. Many times we'll look at somebody like Milton and say, I want to be like Milton, or, Milton, I'm sure you've said, if I could just have this person's business and everything would be all right. And it just doesn't work that way, guys. We have to make the decision to improve ourselves and have a business that we want. It might have similar results as somebody that we know or admire, but ultimately it's got to be us that makes that change for who we want to be.
Yeah, so what you're saying is really change doesn't happen externally, it happens internally.
Yeah, every time when we're trying to make a change simply to copy someone else's success or life or business or whatever, I think we've all been there in some way, and what's usually the result?
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue into the next topic I want to ask you about is, I guess this section I call coaching, right? So, you were my coach. Last week, episode 1, I chose to have a good friend of mine who I interviewed, Zach Purdy. He's a new agent, first couple of years, and he's got the good fortune of coaching directly with Mike. And I think so fitting that we tied you guys into he's one, your episode 2. So kind of I'm just going to spit out the questions and you can ask them. Why do so many great agents have a coach? What have you learned from being a coach? And what have you learned from coaching? Please.
Well, my memory is horrible, so let's start with the first one.
Let's go number 1. Why do so many people have?
I think there's a point where all of us, and no matter how high up the scale you go, all of us want a sounding board. We want approval. We want guidance. And anybody that's in the self-improvement field recognizes that it's just so much harder to do it alone. And there's a point, and Milton, if we were to coach again today, there's nothing new that I could share with you. There's a point where I'm not going to be able to give any more new ideas as a coach.
Right.
Then it just becomes about how can I help amplify what you already know and get the best results out of you.
Okay. Fair enough. And so what have you learned from being a coaching client yourself? And with your coaches, I think you shared some of the best coaches you learned from. What are 1 or 2 things you've learned from?
Well, I think that number 1 is that the process is never ending, right? I think as long as someone is wanting to grow and is willing to, then there's a place for a coach in their lives.
Okay.
That's number 1. And number 2 would be the more that I coach, the more I realize how much I need to grow as one.
Okay. So essentially the more you give that knowledge, the more you realize there's other things you don't know that you need to learn.
Yeah, I think a parallel example from being in production, and tell me if you guys can appreciate this. You get into the business, you're a new agent, you have a great first year, and you actually do worse the second year than you did the first year.
Dang.
Okay, anybody been there? Right? It's when we go into things not knowing anything, there is a blind faith that comes along with, and there's a big advantage to that blind faith. The challenge is then once we know things, then the ego starts to set in, and that challenging level 3 on Maslow's levels of learning starts to kick in, where the ego starts to run with it. And that's really where the real learning begins. Once we have the building blocks figured out, the very basic stuff, then it's all head game. Right? Does anybody here play golf or attempt to?
I tried to the other day, then I stopped.
No golfers on? Okay, Zach, so you're a golfer. You can appreciate this. How long have you been playing golf?
Can't hear you, Zach.
So not long. I mainly just go to Top Golf, but I'm starting to try to get into it.
Well, anybody that's been playing golf for any period of time, ask a friend or family member that does. Ask them if they're any better today than when they first started. And I think the overwhelming answer that you're going to get to that question is no. And in many cases, they're worse. All right, because it's not that we don't know how to play the game, but just this is what gets in the way, right? So thank you for that, Zach. We can appreciate that. Enjoy your next Top Golf round. That's, as they say, everybody shoots par on the range.
Get some Bud Light. Good.
You know it.
Okay, so you're still a coach. I mean, you're coaching, or are you currently being coached? Which one is it?
Yes.
Got it. Okay. And we've shared a few of the same coaches. So talk to me about your coaching. Like if you were taking on a new agent that's watching this and they said, I really like that guy. He speaks real slow, but I could tell he's he's a tactician. He's very analytical, but he just makes me think, which that would be my feedback, is Mark George made me think about the simplicity of the business, and it made me better. And so if you were taking a new agent into your schedule, what are the first couple things you'd work with them on?
Well, do we mean new, like brand new agent, hasn't even done a deal yet, or just new to coaching?
I think the majority of people that are in my group, National Prospectors, which is a free free mastermind group on Facebook, they're in the first maybe 1 to 3 years of real estate. So
Gotcha. Okay. So they've done a transaction. And that's something that I've been learning as a coach here, especially of new agents that are on my team, is I've got to be where they are, and I would need to be where an agent is in their career. Are we talking about fundamentals of how to write a contract, how to present yourself professionally, or are we talking about enhancing your prospecting, closing skills, objection handling? Probably regardless of where an agent's at, we would start with everybody's favorite topic, which would be time management, which you'll probably notice is the #1 chapter in most, real estate trainings today.
Yeah.
Let's find a schedule that works for everybody based on their goals, not somebody else's. I think that's a challenge that a lot of clients get into, is they'll see, like Milton, you might post your schedule online somewhere and someone says, you know what, I'm going to follow Milton's schedule and I'm going to have Milton's results.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it just doesn't work that way, right? Everybody's got a different life. Everybody's got different goals. And we've got to figure out, how are we going to fit your business into your life so that you can still have life, #1, but #2 is you're getting the most out of your work day. So I think regardless of where somebody's at, we would start there. And then, we put together a solid business plan that makes sense, that's reasonable. Who can attack who? Well, let me ask you this way. Who is, just being honest, not going to hit their goal that they set at this time last year?
Me.
That's okay. Right? That's most of us, right?
My friend
the way
David
it goes.
Pitney, he's analytical. He's like,
Yeah. That's okay. And by the way, guys, that's normal. All right. There's nothing wrong with that. And being able to admit that demonstrates your maturity as a business person. So a big part of coaching anybody, especially around this time of year, is setting a reasonable annual goal, right? Many times of which we'll have the conversation about lowering it. I think we've had that conversation a couple of times, Milton.
yeah,
Right? Lowering it to something that's more attainable. And I'll tell you, there's no bigger thrill in, at least in my career as a coach, than to have that mid-year or three-quarter year conversation about raising a goal up because they're ahead of where they should be, versus having to talk them off the ledge of saying, hey, do you think we should start, looking at lowering your goal?
yeah,
You can imagine one conversation is a little more enlightening than the other.
yeah. Gotcha. So when you're done with, working with them as a single agent, probably the biggest question a lot of us have is, how do you go from a productive single agent doing 30, 40, 50 deals to being a successful team leader and growing a team? Like what does that look like, that process?
That's a great question, because I think there's two ways to get into being a successful team leader. There's lots of teams out there, the majority of which I don't think make it. But I'd say the two main ways would be to be, as a great agent, a good, strong listing agent with, a good track record, some time enough in the business to be relevant to your hires, to your team members. Of course, with a long past client list that will feed business to the team, and not get buried in lead gen expense. I think that's option number one, is to be what we would call a producing team leader. And the other one would be like a straight CEO style, which we're seeing, Milton, I think we have a few of those in our market here, where they've never sold a house, but they do have very, very good management and training skills, or at least recruiting skills anyway. And they effectively just buy a real estate business that they step in and operate from more of a CEO level than from a production level. So my guess would be most everybody here is a producing agent. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Then probably option A is going to be the way to go here. And if you're thinking about a team, the first thing to be building out is the operations department. And what I see a lot of times is an agent will just want to start hiring buyer's agents without having a real solid operations department. And personally, I look at a team having three value propositions. And number one would be coaching and training. Number two would be operations. And number three would be lead generation. Right. And that's in that order. Right. So, leads you can get anywhere. I'll say this: good operations you can't get anywhere, but anybody with a real team should have some kind of operations department. The quality of it might vary, but then the reason why an agent would join and should stay is because the coaching and training.
Makes sense. And selfishly, one of the reasons I do these interviews is anytime I'm pierced with a question, I start trying to look for the answer. Try to model great agents. So why would someone first build out the operations department, and what would that look like in detail?
Well, because quite frankly, if an agent is having to do all their own admin, then why pay out 50% to a team or whatever that split is?
Hmm.
Right? It's kind of just they could just get their own. The admin department is the operations department is really the core of the team, and the salespeople, if you can imagine, are kind of floating around that, right? So that's like the bread and butter of 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 a team, really. And I think without it, then there's not a real solid center of gravity for the agents to revolve around.
I got you. So like I have one admin, we got one buyer's agent. My fear is always, two, I don't want to bring on more costs. And then three, how do I generate leads for the buyer's agent? So what would you tell an agent
Yep.
like me going through that process?
Well, you're in a great spot because you're listing enough homes each month to draw leads off those listings, give them open house opportunities, sign calls, certainly referrals from those clients, just listed, just sold calls if you had to. So, but when you get beyond that, when your what we'll call organic lead gen isn't enough, then if you want to have leads for people to call, then paid lead gen is just an unfortunate necessity. Well, it's not, let's just say a necessary evil, which other coaching programs don't necessarily subscribe to. But the fact is if we're gonna supply enough opportunities for people to call, aside of cold calls, right? Like if we're gonna have our buyers agents calling the expireds and just listed, just sold all day, then why do they need to work for us? They could just do it themselves. Right. So, there comes a point where we're going to have to spend a little to make a little. Right.
Got it.
And, but where you are and where I would recommend anybody to start would be to just be a great listing agent, right? List enough property to give your small team, maybe an agent or two, enough opportunities to jump on and, maybe you buy them some additional leads or not. But where you're at right now, Milton, how many homes are you going to list this year?
Just above 80.
So 80 homes for an agent or two on the buyer agent side is plenty of content for them to work off of between opens, just listed, just sold, and sign calls and web leads off those. That should give them enough leads to provide them, a decent income.
Makes sense. So if you were to map it out, you would say step one, be a great single agent listing based. Step two, build your infrastructure with the admin side. All right. Step three, bring in some sales help, 2 or 3 people.
Yep.
And their foundational lead gen model would be leads off listings, open houses, and just listed, just sold.
Yeah. And that would be the lead gen cost free version of that. And but then the accountability is on you to continue to listing 6-7 homes a month to keep those new opportunities in front of them, especially in today's market where homes are selling as fast as they are. The lead gen off of our listings is way down, because they're just not on the market long enough to draw the web inquiries, the sign calls, and we might even have only one open house in a new listing before it goes under contract. So even that opportunity is way down. So, we as the listing agent, we got to be on top of bringing in new listing opportunities until we subscribe to a paid lead gen component of our business.
I see. Okay. So let's say we were, try this real quick. Let's say we were leaving off with Mark George writing a legacy for us and saying, leave me with a quote or a story or an analogy where everyone on the call can just take away from it. Where would you leave us with?
Well, I'll tell you what. Then let me read you a great quote.
Perfect.
That I read this morning, which I thought was pretty cool. Life is like a camera. Focus on the good times, develop from the negatives, and if things don't work out, take another shot.
Damn.
That was
That's
a fun
great.
one I came across this morning.
That's awesome, man. Thank you, Mark. Does anyone have a question for Mr. Mark George? We got a few minutes. I'll stay on until 1 to mastermind with some of you. What questions can you guys ask Mark right now?
They've all got it, Milton. See, that's just the quality of your presentation.
Yeah, I'm
Excellent
getting
job.
better at this. I'm getting better at this. So, Mark, thank you so much.
Yep.
I'm so
Sure.
grateful to have you as a coach, a competitor, and most importantly, a friend.
Well, I can certainly coach and friend. I don't know how much of a competitor I am for you these days. You're just doing so great, and I'm very proud of what you've done. So,
Yes, sir.
you guys ever have any questions? Milton's got all my contact info. I think he's got a link for us as well with some fun little videos on there. And anytime I can be of assistance to you guys, you let me know.
So if anyone needs to reach you as far as a question, a referral, or they want to hire you as their coach, what's your phone number and your website?
Well, first things first, let's make sure that referral goes to Milton. Secondly, my cell number you can write down is 407-702-4307. You can reach me anytime.
So again, Mark George, Keller Williams in Orlando, Florida.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good to see you
thank
guys.
you,
Thanks
Mark.
for the time today, Milton.
Thank you, Mark.
You bet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.